And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. We have Tim Alexander here, and our illustrious nuclear expert, Chris Harris, is not going to make it today before Memorial Day, but I'm going to touch on some news stories that are popping up on the blogosphere around the world about Fukushima Daiichi, because remember, Memorial Day is not just remembering our troops, but the basic constitution is remembering the blood not only of our troops, but of Jesus, and the blood of all the animals in the North Pacific Ocean that are dying, and soon the human race, due to Fukushima Daiichi and the inaction of governments and scientists to take this seriously. So let's rock and roll. Tim, what's the latest news? We have filibuster by Rand Paul, the only one actually willing to stand up, and the idiot Jeb Bush trying to attack him, saying that the Patriot Act is constitutional. What kind of moron and evil bastard is this guy? There's no word for it.
What kind of country is this that our big choice, it appears, as we head into next year, a presidential election, is a choice, and let's put parentheses around that word, between another member of the Bush criminal family and Hillary Rodham Clinton. And if that's not a criminal family, I don't know what is. Democracy is sadly a farce in this country for several reasons.
We can fix it. We can fix it if the population.
Bribery.
Well, even in a minority,
bribery about 20 or so years ago with political action committees, the Supreme Court said that corporations are people, yet they don't have the limits on them that people do as far as contributions. So the big billion-dollar corporations can buy politicians with greater ease. And, of course, we use computers for voting and counting in most areas of the United States, and that's as insecure as you can possibly get. You just saw in the British election, they now think that about 20 seats, marginal seats, were stolen by the Conservative Party by mail ballots, which is their way to scam, and that's what they used a lot of that to defeat the Scottish independence vote.
Right.
When the crooks steal the election, and there's no choice anyway, is that a democracy?
Well, Tim, I think there's a simple answer.
Look at this idiot in the White House, this homosexual face man that they've got in the White House, who probably is not even an American citizen, and he's never really bothered to address that issue properly, except they've released some documents that within minutes, hundreds of experts across the country were able to say, well, this has been photoshopped, and every picture of the current president when he was young and in college has been photoshopped. I mean, wake up, America. You're not living in the country you think you are, that we used to be living in. It's all fraud. It's all controlled by the most demonic, evil criminals that you could possibly imagine.
Right. And now we do have alternatives, though, Tim. I know you like to paint the horrifying bad picture, but if a minority of people back Rand Paul, who's the only candidate I say is a good one, but we also need to not give him a carte blanche. We need to shackle him and control him so that he makes sure that he does what we want. Because remember now, the president is the chief servant of the public, and we are sovereigns. We pass authority to the government. They don't get it out of nowhere, out of the vacuum or the ether. They get it from us. It's all delegated authority. And the problem is with the Patriot Act, this needs to stop. They're actually trying to turn us from sovereigns into slaves in a feudal scientific empire.
Well, they're passing a bill. They're passing an act to replace that, but basically it's the same Patriot Act, just slightly watered down.
Well, I think they need to stop it. They need to realize, firstly, if you want to stop terrorism, I'm going to give the first policy, my list of bullet points for stopping. Number one, stop Muslim immigration into America. Number two, deport all Muslims out of America. Number three, go and attack all extreme Islamic fundamentalists anywhere in the world with Delta Force, kill them and put them in the ground. Number four, stop supporting the state of Israel, annex the whole state so the Joint Chiefs can go to sleep at night, and also annex the entire territory from the Nile River to the Euphrates, the Abrahamic territories given by God to his people, which is not just Jews, it's Christian, make it a Jewish and Christian nation, so that Christians can feel safe in this nation, which is a state of the United States. Make certain we know that we have no more industrial espionage with the Chinese. We have Wang Yi recently just arrested, and the Chinese have the nerve to be enraged over the fact that they're doing hundreds of billions of dollars of industrial espionage every year, put tariffs on all of our goods overseas, and make certain that we make no treaties with multiple nations so that our Congress and Senate become vestigial. And anyone who wants to become president must be a born American. This idea that Ted Cruz is a Canadian and Marco Rubio, who's a Cuban, think that they have the right to run as president. Why? What gives them that right? And then we have illegitimate people that are Americans, like Jeb Bush, who shouldn't open his mouth. He should be embarrassed by his previous presidential father and brother. This is disgusting.
Well, he and his whole family should be in prison. I mean, look, one of the big problems is these people are criminals and they get by with criminal behavior. Old man Bush was one of the CIA operatives at the assassination of President Kennedy. Nobody that was actually involved in it was either arrested. The fall guy, the set-up fall guy, Oswald, was assassinated, but nobody else was arrested other than Jack Ruby, who shot Oswald, and he supposedly died in prison. In reality, they put him on a plane to Tel Aviv, and he lived out the rest of his life in Israel.
Here's the
nobody is punished for these crimes. When nobody gets punished for a crime, well, hey, Katie, bar the door.
We haven't had a president since John F. Kennedy. But remember now,
I agree.
Kennedy was assassinated in collaboration between the CIA and the Mossad.
Yeah.
Kennedy was taken out because he was going to block nuclear materials. And I know, because one of my friends that I actually assisted doing research, his father was the senior director of the Israeli intelligence for Eastern Canada back in 1973 when I was working on my PhD in marine bacteriology, and I was helping my friend working on his master's in psychology, putting electrodes into mice. So people need to be totally aware that what we have going on here is completely illegal.
Well, it goes back even further than that. The Soviet Union got a lot of its technical expertise in developing a hydrogen or atomic bomb directly from the United States. I had a professor in college that literally went into the Soviet Union, and he was kind of a leftist, so they let him in and they let him do the research. And I mean, he found that key equipment was shipped via Alaska to Siberia, marked as agriculture equipment. It wasn't agriculture equipment. It was atomic research equipment. At the top, there have been a certain element that are absolute criminals, and they're tied into the global banking cartel. They want war. And first off, they're demonic. They're devil worshippers. They worship Satan. So they want war because Satan wants war. It's his ultimate blood orgy, all the death, slaughter, and horrible stuff that happens in a war. But also they make profit off of it. And you see this today. We created China. China was a very backward, massive country. We created China. The globalists created China because they wanted to weaken the United States and build up this third world country into a superpower. Just yesterday, we flew one of our most advanced U.S. Navy surveillance aircraft, a P-8, over the islands, the artificial islands that China has been building up on reefs in the South China Sea. And the plane was warned 8 different times by the Chinese Navy to leave and leave at once. Now, we're provoking them, but then again, what the hell are they doing, taking reefs and making airstrips and islands out of them a long way from China? Well,
right.
You got to have an enemy to have a war, you see. And
right,
just like Russia is, after the Soviet Union fell, Russia was not our natural ally, but we had to provoke a war with it in Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. You have the wrong people pulling the strings, and the American people better wake up, because we are many and they are very, very few. And if we really put our minds to it, we can reclaim our country. Otherwise,
exactly. And welcome back. And Tim, that was a very good rant, and we have lots of news to cover today, so let's rock and roll. By the way, Chris won't be here,
yeah, right.
But I wanted to just open up before we get back into your news items. I'm just going to pull a few off the top of what's showing up in the latest news. TEPCO may dump Fukushima rad water into the sea again. Of course, they're going to. The NRA approves restart for the third nuclear plant in Ehime. So the national, the NRA in Japan. They're still dumping, of course, radiation into the Great Lakes, which is occurring by our Canadian friends that pretend to be so squeaky clean. Of course, they're also collaborating with the military forces that are doing an anemic job against stopping ISIL or ISIS. Fukushima wasteland uninhabitable for decades. They're going to cut off funding to all the families displaced by 2018, which means if you're the 55,000 families that were displaced, sent out of Fukushima Prefecture on nearby Oi, you are going to have no more money. You're going to be destitute with no money by 2018. And there's a 6,000% cancer rate increase in Fukushima children, 6,000. Also, by the way, this causes, at distance, in North America and Europe, an increase in cardiac disease, sudden infant death syndrome, and cancer rates in everybody.
The latest thing they're finding in wildlife, marine wildlife in the Pacific, is a strange black fungus that normally only appears on land.
Yeah, that fungus, by the way, I called a radio amplified fungus, and actually it turns out it's growing in the streets in Tokyo, the largest industrial city complex and outer area in the world. It's number one. And that black mold fungus actually loves radiation. It thinks radiotoxins are like vitamins.
Wow.
No kidding. It actually makes it grow faster. And entire generation of baby sea lions are dying. Pacific is fading. There are no orca whales at all. They don't sing anymore. The salmon run's gone. The smelt run's gone. It's like, and people think, well, this might be a future thing, Deagle. You might be talking prophetically. I said, how about talking about stuff that's going on now? There's a complete blackout in the news and the political and scientific community to not even, as I said yesterday when I had on John B. Wells, I said, where the hell is my disrespect? I don't even get the disrespect of scientists and people willing to argue with me about these issues, because even bringing up the topic and starting a dialogue will prove I'm correct about how late the hour is and how catastrophic.
Look, the ones in the know you're correct. And the ones that are in Gaga land, and Fukushima is not on the radar, it's something that happened a few years ago, and what about
well, the usual garbage and disrespect I get.
They're too big. They're people like that are too damn stupid to understand what's happening.
The usual disrespect I'll get will be from other people, including other hosts and other people that will say, what about Dr. Deagle and the Colorado Board of Examiners that he was killing patients? That's a total lie, and it was invented by the Colorado Board because I was closing down industry and actually coming against doctors who were connected to the Colorado Board of Examiners. There are groups of people, including 9 News there, and they're all going to get sued. The suit's in the process.
Be in the public and not have people say nasty things. I've found stuff on the internet that I'm a total fraud. I didn't claim the earldom. Blah blah blah. Yeah, of course I sat in the House of Lords and that was photographed. But and usually they quote English Spears Law rules, not Scott Spears Law rules. I had somebody one time said I had to be a CIA agent. Yeah, right. Like the CIA would want me. They'd shoot me if I got half a mile near their headquarters.
Yeah, you're on the red you're dead list there, Tim. Just like I am. It's not like we're on the what's called the double red. We're so red, they don't even want to transport us past our front doorstep into a truck. They want to make sure you're dead before you get to the Bearcat.
They may get a little of that in return, but
they're going to get more than a little. I'm highly prepared here. If Dalton Special Forces come here, some of them aren't going home to Mama. They're going to meet their demise. And I have armor-piercing weapons here too.
We're in a time that is literally right out of the Bible. In fact, I just talked to one of my oldest friends, and she likes to listen to Fox News and so forth. But she said, this is kind of scary. It's out of the Bible. And I said, yes, it is. I said, you should read my site. Of course, she's read it a couple times. It absolutely scares the hell out of her, and she won't go back. But the reality is, this is out of the Bible. And
Linda Moulton Howe was on the John B. Wells show, Caravan to Midnight. He used to be on Coast to Coast Radio, and this is my analysis of it. He was removed because he was more popular on actual polls than the entire week's shows was George Norrie, who does a pretty poor job of interviewing. But John B. Wells was awesome. And 2 years ago, he set up his own show. He's got millions of audience now. It's a private thing. We have to purchase by the quarter $15 or $60 for a year to listen to his programs. They're amazing. He raised a lot of really good issues, and he asked questions. And of course, I'm the guy that pretty well has an answer to almost any question you can raise. People say that's not possible. They go, well, ask me then. And he asked, well, what's causing these booming sounds like sounds of trumpets all over the world, from Russia to South America? I said they're gravity waves coming in from a dwarf star, and they hit the upper plasma layer of the troposphere at 70 to 80,000 feet, and as the air expands and collapses, it creates a trumpet-like sound. That's because we have the approach of Herculebus, the destroyer, which is a dwarf star that can come within 55 million miles of Earth, and it can cause major earthquakes, volcanoes, changes in release of methane hydrates from the bottom of the ocean.
We do have heightened volcanic activity and earthquake activity.
Right. What Jesus said,
40
Matthew 24.
volcanoes have been erupting recently, and that is indicative of what you're saying is correct. Now, I will be the first to say I am not an expert on astronomy and the dwarf star, so I can't speak to that, but I will say...
I am. I'm an expert on this and advanced...
indications that something's happening.
Right. I'm an expert on advanced quantum and hyperdimensional astrophysics. I'm an expert on advanced nuclear materials, radiation, plastic and regular explosives, any area in chemistry and science, physics, electronics, multiplexing signals, artificial intelligence. I only talk about 10% of what I know. People would be blown away by just how much I know. And I do this not to kind of boast, because God made me have these skills to do one thing, because He made me with a part missing. I do not have a brake or reverse gear or reverse drive. If I see something, God's going to say to me, Deagle, like in the machine gun nest in World War I, run to the top of that hill, take over the machine gun nest, zigzag up the hill, and I'll cover you. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the first one to volunteer and do it. And I'm not going to shut up or be quiet no matter what attacks. And last year, of course, I had an attack that was very serious. You know about it. I'm totally well. And I can tell you right now, I am expanding dramatically. People need to know if they're going to get a mass email today about some great announcements. But you know already what's happening, too. I'm not going to make any announcements on air here. But things are expanding. We're going to be on many more shows, interviewed. We're going to bring more and more.
You know how you were ill, like Jeff Rentz was attacked.
Oh, I'm totally well. I'm totally well. In fact, stronger than ever. And what people need to understand is that I owe it all to God and His inspiration of how to take the right Nutrimeds, the technologies I have from mild hyperbaric oxygen to thoracic things like micropulse and lumen photon therapy. God made me well, and the reason is I have a job to do. And it's interesting, yesterday when I had John B. Wells, he said, it's like listening to your answers. It's like the Shekinah glory of Moses coming down from the mountains telling people what for and what's what. Yeah, that's the way it is, because he's my ancestor. I'm here to tell you, this is not a rehearsal. This is the end. This is not, maybe it's in the future date, thousands or hundreds or tens of years or dozens of years from now. No, it's today. Today things are winding up, and this fall, things are really going to get nuts this fall.
I think you're right.
And welcome back. And Tim, this thing with the J-Town, by the way, and I'm not going to mention specific names either. We talked about this in the break. But I will say the people that are trying to make a big deal of this, what it is basically it's a minor operation that a number of people are kind of squishing it down to less and less of an operation. But it's basically a form of government-sponsored terror pornography to try to put the people in a state of fear so that we will be fearful of the government. The government should fear us. We're getting totally ticked.
Absolutely.
And the fact is,
our founding fathers designed this country. The government should fear the citizens.
And I'm just a notice, by the way, for you NSA, you Special Forces, you Delta, you need to be on our side. In fact, if you actually have any brains, you will be on our side, because if you start attacking and taking veterans, guns from them at 3 o'clock in the morning, the first home you'll get, the second home, some of you are going to die really quickly and in a vicious way. And the third home, you're all going to be captured and executed. And I guarantee you, government, this is what's going to happen. We'll march on every capital. We'll take them over. We'll march on Washington, D.C. No amount of military will stop us, including the military and police will join us. You need to understand the same thing is about to happen in places like China, where the totalitarian regime is now starting to say they're going to rate people's online behavior to determine if you even get a job. These are the death throes of the Chinese empire, of the former communist regime, so fat with becoming billionaires. 80% of the new billionaires in the last 25 years are Chinese, created by the Rothschilds and the international banks.
Yes, and most of them are they're
criminals.
Children of the founding communist.
Right. I went to Benihana.
Communism was created by and funded even Karl Marx, sitting in the British Library.
Right.
was funded by the global banking cartel.
Right. Well, I recently went to a birthday party at Benihana's, which is a hibachi restaurant, and the gentleman there that served us was actually from China, and he said he traveled up last year to Vancouver, Canada, from Southern California here, and he said when he went there, he was totally disgusted because the only people there were wealthy people from northern China. They're all illegal communists, members of the triads, which are basically the Chinese mafia. Mm-hmm. I remember working in the emergency department in 1977 at the Vancouver General. And the Chinese mafia came into our trauma room where I was actually putting a chest tube in a man who was bleeding to death from getting bullets in his chest by a hit. And these three Chinese men came in three-piece suits with Uzi machine guns and said, if you don't clear out, we're going to shoot you too, Dr. Deagle. You know? And so we cleared out, and they finished them off right there in our trauma room. People need to understand what's going on is these people have got Lamborghinis, they've got, the most advanced vehicles, the fanciest hotels and everything in Vancouver because they're Chinese criminals. And the current prime minister now of China is starting to clean this all out. So his own salary now is reduced to $20,000 equivalent U.S.
Yeah, right.
a year.
I know. I read that. Yeah,
right.
Right.
No, it really is happening. Okay, people need to understand this really is happening. There's a revolt. You know why? The people in power in China know that if they don't start toning things down, there's so much intelligent and powerful and now clued-in people that are able to get international access, even though they're trying to block it in China of internet, that the Chinese people are closer to revolution than any other country on earth. And so China...
Well, they're desperate to avoid going back into the warlord era, which is what happened after
the era of
the
communism.
Dowager Empress died, and
right.
You had all these warlords that tore up China, and I mean, China was a heck of a mess for a long time. And they're desperate to avoid that. But, yeah, we made a deal with them, and part of it started with the sale of Chinese-made intermediate-range ballistic missiles to Saudi Arabia years ago. That was kind of a turning thing, and Nixon began the open door to China after that and several things. But, we saw them as this great big country that could supply America and Canada and Western Europe and Australia and so forth with all kind of cheaply made goods. Everything that used to be made here is now made there. Most of our shoes were made in the state of Maine and New Hampshire. Gone. All those factories are gone. As a kid, we had a pajama factory in a nearby city, Boonville, and they sold slight seconds. So I was wearing, $100 pajamas that maybe had a slight second on them from Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue when I was a kid, because my mom and a lot of the ladies would go up there and they'd buy pajamas, and they'd go over and, they'd see, well, okay, I see the little tiny flaw. Well, when you're selling pajamas, even back 40 years ago, I don't know, maybe $50 back then, yeah. You want it perfect. So they were buying really great stuff, but those factories are gone. You see, we made almost everything that we consumed. We made in the United States. Now, almost everything we consume is made in China or someplace else, and they lie to us and say, "Oh, this is a good thing." No, it's not a good thing. We've got 100 million people of working age in America that don't have jobs. We have people working sometimes 2 or 3 part-time jobs at minimum wage, and they can't survive hardly.
Here's some actual numbers.
The middle class is dying. It's not a good thing.
107.3 million people that are dependent on one or another check from the federal government that are basically unemployed or underemployed. 94 million and a half Americans are actually working full-time jobs or supporting everything because the corporations don't pay their fair share. General Electric Corporation that gave Obama in his first term $2 billion in money because of these super PACs did not pay one tap of taxes in the last 5 to 10 years in the United States. Not 1 cent. Although their worldwide profits are in the range of like $30 billion plus, you've got to be kidding, These companies are getting away with murder.
First off, the Internal Revenue Service and the whole concept of taxing, we had to pass an amendment, and guess what? 2 states didn't ratify it. 1 state didn't ratify it at all, and 1 state ratified it with changes, which means 2 states didn't ratify it. That amendment was never ratified. And income tax is unconstitutional, and a U.S. district court has ruled that. But they ignore it because they have to have it to keep this whole scam with the Federal Reserve going. You know, we're now hundreds of trillions of dollars into debt. Well, that's profit for these mostly foreign banksters that own the Federal Reserve System. That's why we have wars. That's why we have wars on poverty, wars on drugs, and so forth that don't work, that only make things worse, but spend a lot of federal tax dollars. That's what it's all about. And the public is set back here fat, stupid, and ignorant, and now we're not so fat because, well, you can't hardly afford to buy food, and there's all kind of population reduction programs running like Roundup and all this stuff, and they're beginning to kill us, and things are getting so far out of control. You know, I mean, you go into a hospital, and if you're in the hospital and they give you a Tylenol, the average price nationwide for a Tylenol is $49. It costs less than a penny to make, $49. And you know, a guy's in a hospital bed, you're sick, and they say, "Hey, buddy, $50 for a Tylenol if you want to get a little relief from your minor pain here. $50. That's extortion. In a rational, sane, moral world, that the hospital administrators would be facing felony charges for extortion. Instead, they make millions. This is the world we've allowed, and the country that we have allowed it to warp into, because the criminals, the evil ones, are on top, and we've got to change that. And
well,
we,
the thing is,
all of us, can.
Well, I read an interesting thing, Tim, and I want you to respond to this. You know, the people say, well, is this red, blue, green list real? Yes, it is. I've actually had classified clearance to know exactly it is real. You and I are on what's called the double red, you're dead list. We're not going to get past the front door if they can get a hold of our carcass. They want us dead on the spot. No going to civil detention camp, because we might just
well, then I'll go to God, and I'll be with my wife.
Here's the point, though. Here's the point, that the guys are on the tip of that list. We're going to have Michael Connolly back on from the U.S. Justice Foundation, who tabled the impeachment documents to Congress. The tip of the red, you're dead list is all our veterans. We have 23 million veterans. If their wife does their bills for them, or they have auto pay, or any reason they had a transitory depression after coming back because their buddies all died, they basically said they're emotionally incompetent by anybody, even if they're not a psychologist, a doctor, or anybody. They can declare them financially incompetent and then declare them illegal to carry a weapon or buy ammunition.
Yeah, well, they can declare anything they want. That doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Exactly. My point is, this is time now. If we don't have the ballot box, and we don't have the voting box, and we don't have, then we're going to go to the cartridge box.
Are you still looking for iodine that you can really trust?
Back with Tim. Tim, we were talking on one of the breaks earlier about this thing with ISIS, and now Russia's saying they're going to declare weapons and bring weapons in. What America's doing is they're dropping weapons, satellite phones, I say it being sarcastic, dropping fruit baskets and balloons, and congratulations for ISIS taking over Palmyra. What's going on is...
Well, the Iraqi government wants us out. Because they know what we've been doing, and Moscow is now ready to supply weapons to Iraq to fight ISIS, and they know that Moscow's not going to be two-faced about it. I mean, we're telling the world, oh, we're bombing the hell out of ISIS, and blah blah blah. It's all lies. And if we bomb, it's usually someplace where they were, not where they're at. And we have documented; it's been documented multiple times that the U.S. Air Force is going in and dropping military supplies to ISIS, arms, munitions, as well as food, medical supplies. And you look at them. I mean, they've got all these flags, all these Toyotas painted the same color. Big bucks are involved. This is not some group of wild-eyed reactionary radicals. These are Arabs recruited from throughout Arabia who are dirt poor. Because remember, the oil money basically benefits the people at the top.
Well, there's a 1,000-man force.
People good money to go and fight.
Well, there's a 1,000-man force that's been recruited from Chechnya and other Soviet republics by ISIL affiliates in Afghanistan, and they're doing three things. Firstly, they're taking over the northern trade routes for the drug trade, going into former Soviet Union. They're taking over southern Afghanistan. They're also taking over an area with the largest supply of lithium for lithium-ion batteries in the world, which is in Afghanistan. And they're threatening to take over the capital. So what's happening is we are literally not only standing by, we're supporting this takeover by these Islamic maniacs because we have an Islamist in the White House, Obama. Obama is an Islamist, period. We have to call it for what it is. We have the head of the CIA appointed by him is an American convert to Islam. Did you know that? The head of the CIA is an American convert to Islam.
No, I didn't know it, but you know what? I think the only God these people believe in is a God with a small g, and that's Satan. Look, these people are evil to the core. Remember Albert Pike, the former Confederate general from the American Civil War, who became the leading Satanist in America and an extreme high-level Masonist. And he wrote a letter right before the First World War. It was published and in the British Museum for years until a Rothschild got on the board, and then it disappeared. And that letter laid out 3 global wars that had to be fought for the New World Order to come about. And he described World War I and World War II excellently. He described how World War I was going to result in the fall of the imperial family in Russia, and et cetera, et cetera. And the Third World War, according to this letter, was going to be fought. And back then, they didn't call them so much Islamic as Muslims or not Muslims. I forget the word. But between the Islam, the forces of Islam, and the forces of Christianity, that's what they're setting up. Because you got to step way back from the trees and look at this. And this is a psyop that's going on, a psychological warfare program that's going on about ISIS and all this stuff. And we're hearing, they're chopping off heads. Well, we know that in some cases, some of the public executions, people have gone through it frame by frame, and they said this is a fake. However, I think probably they are killing people right and left because they're evil, and there's a very negative
Tim,
bad thing in Islamic religion. I don't
Tim,
have much
when you get
respect
150 requests for Delta Force to come in and special ops, to go in and clean it up, because our guys are so well trained and equipped, we can go in surgically like a laser and just go, and they're dead. They're gone. They're dismembered, their supply lines are cut off, and we don't do it. Of 150,
hell, they're getting supplies from Turkey. Do you know that where a lot of the people that are fighting in Syria, they're going through Israeli airports and they're being outfitted and sent in from Israel? Do you know that if they get wounded, they're taken to Israel to Israeli military hospitals?
Oh, Raider, do you know that I talked to a doctor in Israel just yesterday, who's an anesthesiologist, who told me that now it's becoming that the majority of the doctors in Israel are Muslim. The majority of nurses and nurse aides and orderlies are Muslim in Israeli hospitals.
That's nuts.
Right. And what he was saying is he wants to get back to America because his parents live in America. He's a dual citizen. And I can tell you right now, here's what's going to happen. Israel's being served up on a platter to be destroyed. But Israel has all these nuke weapons, and they will resort to what's called the Samson option. And it's all being set by the globalists, because once you push Israel too far, and once you push America too far, you're going to see a massive switchback. Because, for example, if we went in the first Gulf War, for example, was held back by George Bush Sr., if we had gone in with double the force, completely cleaned out the Islamic extremists in both Sunni and Shia.
He held back, and it didn't become apparent, although I suspected it from word one. The reason he held back is Saddam Hussein had a reserve force of 19 Scuds, and those were the ones that were loaded with chemical and biological warfare. And he was using his Scuds, and I said this at the time, he was using his Scuds to deliver ordnance on target, to prove he could deliver ordnance on target. But the ordnance he was delivering was a big old dumb 2,000-pound warhead that made a big explosion. We were claiming at the time, and I've got the tapes, I recorded every breaking news story, Scud alert, and so forth, that we were shooting down so many of these Scuds. In reality, they weren't really Scuds. They were all Hussein missiles, and they were re-engineered by the engineers that Saddam Hussein had hired. They made the fuselage of the missile a little bit longer to give it more range so they could hit Israel. Well, as it was coming in, the terminal re-entry phase, because it was redesigned, it wasn't stable, the the fuselage was breaking up, and we were counting that as a hit. We now know after the fact that we killed between 1 and 3 incoming Scuds. That we actually hit 1 to 3 incoming Scuds. 1 for sure, and 2 are maybes. The rest that we thought we hit, we weren't hitting. They were breaking up. The warheads were still coming in, but by firing these warheads in Saudi Arabia and Israel, Saddam was demonstrating his ability to hit, and we knew he had a reserve force. That's why we didn't go into Baghdad from day one. That's why we had this whole thing under Clinton where we were kind of starving him and so forth. And once he finally threw in the towel and got rid of his trump card, his reserve card, then we did the second Iraq war.
But here's something we don't talk about much, is the Gerald Bull supergun. There's three trump cards that the Syrians have and the Iranians that no one on Earth, including America and Russia, has. Number one is Gerald Bull supergun, which means they can launch without a thermal signature of a launch. They could launch 100 missiles into the upper atmosphere anywhere on Earth from Syria.
There would be a signature on the ground, but there's ways to hide that.
No, there's no signature. I already know from the background research. I researched this very thoroughly.
Well, but when it fires, it puts out heat.
No, there's no thermal signature. It's a linear accelerator tube that's underground, so it only has an exit ramp.
Oh, you're talking about a linear accelerator. You're not talking about his classic.
No. I'm talking about his linear accelerator supergun.
Okay.
And the linear accelerator supergun can take a Toyota and put it in space with no thermal signature. And once it's in space, you can retarget from near space, which, by the way, the only way to stop nuclear missiles, and America knows this, is to catch them in the launch phase, because even the Russian missile systems now, they have every way possible to evade our missile defense systems. Our primary missile defense system is called theater air defense, which is way beyond the Patriot. They had to back engineer to go to the Patriot system. I know, because I was security cleared and shown this in July 10th, 1994 at the underground facility at Schriever Air Force Base. The second area is what's called plasma interferometry in the upper atmosphere that can destroy the missile guidance systems. The third is what's called laser technology, which they have in space-based weapon platforms and aircraft that over the horizon can knock out a missile guidance system and destroy its ability to explode hundreds or even 1,000 miles away, basically by very accurate lasers. Particle beam accelerator lasers, etc.
Well, we've got some we've mounted on the nose of a 747.
Right. And by the way, the new defense for these aircraft carriers that they've popped out in the last few weeks to say, hey, don't worry, we've got protection. They have these high-energy lasers now that are being deployed in all of our naval ships. So any missiles or anything coming in, by the way, the U.S. military and Navy now has laser weapons. And by the way, these will take out everything. So
except
Trump card, America's one step ahead again of all these systems.
Rocket.
Yeah, they can stop all of them.
Well, I hope so.
Yep. Amazing. Have a happy Memorial Day, everybody. Be back tomorrow with our firing line and more. And sales on at midnight.